Usually, at night, I think about what has happened the past day. The work, the stories, hell, even the food. On nights like these, I can't go home. I can't just sit alone in my room. I don't care what I follow when it comes to this type of business. But personally, if it bleeds, it leads. I always pick up on something when I'm editing. Sometimes it's the people, the colors, even a half-cold coffee cup.
Hey Willow, I know this is kind of last minute, but could you go meet someone with Chase? He says he has a lead.
Hey, can we help you? You guys the people Erica told me about?
She says you have a lead. Give us the lead.
There's this guy who owes me some money. Thinking maybe you could find him, talk some sense into him.
Why us?
I've heard things about you guys. That you solve cases? It's gotta be secret. No one can know anything about it. I can pay. I have money.
Okay, we're in.
The man's identity is anonymous. His street name is Red Rabbit. He recently did a mural in the subway. I suggest you check there first.
Take a look at this.
What the hell?
I know. Who's putting that on a wall? Criminal. Ooh. Yeah, I gotta go study for a test. AP season and all. I'll see you around, yeah? All right.
Why are we looking at a blank wall?
This is where the mural was supposed to be, but how do we even know this is the right mural?
Because I said so. I traced the picture back to the subway, and this is the only image that matches Google Maps.
Alright, well, maybe we should call it. I don't think we're gonna get any further with this tonight. Yeah, I agree. Let's just go home, get some rest. Sorry, Willow. Try again another time.
So we're just gonna give up until he makes another dark and disturbing mural that we miss?
Hey, it's Joe. Erica told me that you guys are trying to chase down that red rabbit. I know how fun chasing leads is, but it's important to sleep too. I just really think that it's best that you...
If he just took down the mural, he's probably going to try to put another one back up.
Yo.
I found him. Red Rabbit.
Damn. Really? I'm at 7-Eleven. I'll hurry. What do you think?
Chase, now.
Oh, okay. Is that the guy? The one with the red hoodie and the red... yeah, I see him. Yo. Bro. Don't kill me, bro! Yeah, better start talking or I will.
Chase, where's the money?
Tell Frank I'll get him the money. I promise.
You see, that just doesn't quite work for us. This Frank guy, he's in a bit of a rush. We need that money now.
I was gonna get him the money. I swear.
Then where the hell is it?
It's just over there.
You, up!
Why are we looking at a dog?
Well, it's not like money per se, but it's like money, you know?
This isn't money.
Yeah, what are you gonna do about it?
We were told to do.
Yo, you ain't even seen my check yet, though.
Why did you do the mural? What does it mean?
I don't know. I had a dream.
We're done here. Let's go.
Loser.
Hey, just take the dog! Just take the dog!